She walks. Not the queen you've seen in ancient scrolls, not the stoic leader etched in marble. This is a woman navigating the suffocating, guttural roar of a Roman crowd, her jeweled robes catching the merciless Mediterranean sun like a galaxy scattered on cloth. Heavy gold chains, so substantial they are less adornment and more a burden, weigh down her wrists and neck. 2 Roman guards, their shoulders taut with strain, march beside her, their hands not touching her, but literally bearing the weight of those chains meant to shackle, not merely to display. Yet she does not cry, she does not beg. Her gaze, steady and impossibly distant, drifts over thousands of faces, each one a blur in the blinding, hostile light. She understands their language, a cacophony of jeers and triumphant shouts, but she refuses to speak it. She has been walking for 3 hours. She will walk for 4 more. The procession ahead stretches into an agonizing eternity. Caged lions, brought from distant Africa, snarl at the humid Roman air. Chained soldiers, their wounds still fresh and bleeding, stumble forward, barely upright. Grim, vivid painted replicas depict cities burning, a stark testament to Rome's unyielding might. All of it moves at an excruciatingly slow pace, through streets packed with Romans, all here to witness the spectacle. Behind her, an ominous silence, a heavy, gaping space, the terrifying gap reserved for those who will not see another sunset. Look at her again. The jewels still gleam. Her robes, now dusty from the endless march, remain undeniably regal. The chains are, without question, solid gold. Why such finery for her own execution? Why are they not killing her already? This, we are told, is the moment history remembers: the captured queen, the Roman triumph, the public humiliation. But what you think happened here did not happen at all. Or worse, it did, but for reasons no one wants to admit. To truly understand what Rome did to queens, you must first understand what queens were never allowed to be. If documented history still matters to you, stay close, because what you are about to hear is not what you have been taught. Her feet are bleeding, small dark stains blooming on the white stone of the Roman road. She doesn't look down. The year is 272 CE. She is Queen Zenobia of Palmyra. While Rome tore itself apart in bitter civil war, she carved out an empire stretching from Egypt to Anatolia. Legions couldn't stop her then, for they were too busy slaughtering each other for the throne. But civil wars, like all things, eventually end. When Emperor Aurelian finally turned his formidable gaze east, her forces crumbled. She fled toward Persia with what remained of her loyal army, but they caught her at the Euphrates River. She offered no resistance. There was nowhere left to run. Captured enemies were routinely paraded through Rome in triumphs, public celebrations of victory. Defeated kings, displayed in chains, were then executed in the Tullianum prison, that cold, stone chamber built into the Capitoline Hill where Rome's most dangerous enemies were strangled or starved. This grim tradition had stood for 5 centuries. Zenobia, by all accounts, was to walk through Rome in golden chains. Then she would die. That is the story. Except the Historia Augusta, a collection of imperial biographies written 40 years after her capture, explicitly claims she was adorned with jewels that caught the sunlight. Why waste such an expensive display on someone about to die? And every single ancient account mentions one specific detail. She maintained remarkable composure throughout the entire ordeal. Why does every witness emphasize her dignity? What exactly were they watching for? Aurelian captured Zenobia in 272 CE. He did not parade her through Rome in 274 CE. 2 years passed. Standard practice demanded immediate display. Vercingetorix walked in Caesar's triumph within months of his capture. Jugurtha was paraded the same year he surrendered. What took 2 years? Most accounts end here. They tell you she walked through Roman chains, they tell you crowds jeered, they call it humiliation. They don't tell you what humiliation actually meant, or why it required 2 years of preparation. Most people stop listening here. That's why history keeps lying. Now brace yourself for the brutal truth that comes next. Those golden chains weren't symbolic, they were functional. Here is what we know about Roman law regarding war captives. The principle was called ius gentium, the law of nations. It stated simply that military defeat transforms free people into property. Once a city fell, once an army surrendered, its inhabitants became legally enslaved, regardless of former status, regardless of gender. A defeated queen had no more legal standing than a defeated soldier. Actually, she had less. Roman law protected its citizens from certain punishments. To flog a Roman citizen was scandalous. To execute one without trial sparked outrage. But foreign captives held no such protections. They could be displayed, sold, or killed at the discretion of their captors. The 12 Tables, Rome's earliest legal code from the 5th century BCE, made this explicit. Prisoners taken in war became the property of the Roman state. So if captive queens were property, slaves by legal definition, why did Rome treat them differently from other slaves? After Cleopatra's death, her daughter, Cleopatra Selene, was taken to Rome as a child. She wasn't executed, she wasn't enslaved in the traditional sense. Instead, she was married to a client king and sent to rule Mauritania. So why did Tacitus feel compelled to note that even Romans were shocked? What line precisely had been crossed? The Romans weren't mindless brutes. They built legal systems that survived millennia. They wrote philosophy about virtue, justice, and honor. They understood dignity. So when they stripped a queen naked and flogged her while her people watched, they knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't just punishing her. They were answering a question. The triumphs, the public displays, the careful choreography of captured royalty walking through Roman streets in chains, these weren't about showing conquered enemies. They were about proving something Rome needed conquered people to believe. To understand what, you need to see what came before the triumphs, what happened in the months, sometimes years, between capture and parade. Captive queens underwent a process Roman records barely mention. Between capture and triumph, they weren't held in prisons. They were held in preparation. The Historia Augusta mentions Zenobia was so debilitated by captivity that guards had to support her during the procession. Not from torture. Her jewels and robes were intact. Her body showed no marks from deliberate physical weakening. This was controlled starvation. Just enough food to survive, not enough to maintain strength. The amount was meticulously calculated. Roman military doctors understood nutrition. They knew exactly how much grain, how much water, how much protein kept a body alive while ensuring progressive muscle loss. The rations were delivered on irregular schedules, sometimes twice a day, sometimes once every 2 days. The unpredictability prevented the body from adjusting to a routine, further eroding resilience. Then there was sleep deprivation, achieved through constant noise and irregular schedules. Guards changed watch with maximum disruption. Doors slammed at random intervals. Conversations were held deliberately near her cell at odd hours. Torches were replaced at midnight, just when darkness might have finally allowed rest. Her cell was never completely dark, never completely quiet, never predictable. This was isolation alternating with forced interaction. Days of complete silence where no one spoke to her, no one acknowledged her presence. She was fed through a slot in the door like an animal, left alone with nothing but her thoughts and the growing weakness in her limbs. Then, sudden interrogations, questions about Palmyra's treasury, about her generals, about her son's whereabouts, questions she had already answered, questions that had no purpose except to force her to speak, to engage, to remember she was still human enough to be questioned. Then, silence again. Not enough to damage the body visibly, just enough to ensure she couldn't stand without assistance. Just enough that when the day came for her to walk through Rome, she would need Roman hands to hold her upright. The symbolism was intentional. She would walk in her own power, Or rather, she would try to walk in her own power and fail, and Rome would be there to catch her. But there was something else in this meticulous preparation process, a detail mentioned only in passing by ancient sources, yet absolutely crucial to Rome's psychological warfare. Captive royalty, before their moment of public humiliation, were required to watch. Watch what? Other prisoners being executed, gladiatorial games, public punishments in the arena. Cassius Dio describes this chilling detail regarding the captives from the Dacian Wars. They were brought to Rome months before Trajan's triumph. During that time, they were regularly taken to the Colosseum, not to fight, but to observe. They watched criminals thrown to wild animals. They watched gladiators kill each other in brutal duels. They witnessed prisoners of war from earlier campaigns executed in elaborate staged battles, reenactments of Rome's victories performed by men about to die. They sat in special sections, heavily guarded, deliberately visible to the vast crowd. The Roman audience could see them watching, could see their reactions. Why? To ensure they understood, intimately, what Roman mercy looked like. When Zenobia finally walked through Rome in those golden chains, weak enough to need support, she had already spent months watching what happened to captives Rome didn't consider valuable enough to preserve. She had seen men torn apart by dogs. She had seen gladiators bleed out onto the sand while thousands cheered. She had seen prisoners of war, men who had once been soldiers, who had once fought for their kingdoms, reduced to mere entertainment. She had seen what execution looked like. She knew with bone-deep certainty what she had been spared. And everyone watching her knew she knew. Before the triumphs, captive royalty were bathed, meticulously dressed in their own royal regalia, given their priceless jewelry back. The preparation for this public display was elaborate, almost sacred in its precision. Ancient sources mention that Zenobia's robes were repaired where campaign dirt had damaged them. Her jewels were cleaned. Professional jewelers were brought in to restore their blinding shine. Her hair was arranged in the elaborate marine royal style. Every single detail mattered. Every element of her appearance had to be perfect. This wasn't mercy, it was calculated contrast. The message wasn't, look at our captive, we are so kind. It was, look at what power looks like when it can no longer protect you. Think about what the Roman crowd saw that day. A woman dressed in silks that cost more than most Romans earned in a year, wearing jewelry that represented the wealth of an entire kingdom. Every visible element screaming royalty, power, status. Except she couldn't walk on her own. A queen who once commanded armies, who signed treaties with Persia, who administered justice over millions, who executed enemies and pardoned allies, who had minted coins with her own face beside the emperor's, claiming equality with Rome itself, now walking in chains, while Roman guards had to hold her upright because she was too weak to stand alone. Her robes were royal, her jewels were real, her hair was perfect, but she needed help to walk. That contrast was everything. That was the entire purpose of the 2 years of meticulous preparation, to create a woman who looked like power incarnate, but moved like a broken thing. Roman triumphs were psychological warfare, but not primarily against the defeated queen herself. They were messages to her people, to allied kingdoms watching from the crowd, to future rebels considering resistance. The subtext was always clear. If divine right could have saved her, it would have. If military strength could have saved her, it would have. If political authority could have saved her, it would have. None of it did. But that still doesn't explain why some queens were spared. Zenobia lived. Most captive kings died immediately after their triumphs. Vercingetorix, the chieftain who unified the Gallic tribes against Caesar, was executed within hours. Jugurtha, king of Numidia, starved to death in the Tullianum over 6 agonizing days, while Rome celebrated above. Simon Bar Kokhba, leader of the Jewish revolt, was strangled in the Forum while Titus's triumph continued to the Temple of Jupiter. Zenobia, however, was given a villa outside Rome. Ancient sources claim her daughters married Roman senators. Why? The answer isn't simply in what Rome did to its enemies, It's in what Rome needed from its allies. By the 3rd century CE, Rome controlled territory from Britain to Mesopotamia. They couldn't garrison every single province, couldn't watch every border, couldn't station legions in every city that might rebel. The math simply didn't work. Rome had roughly 30 legions, about 150,000 legionaries. That's one soldier for every 300 people in the empire. Not enough to occupy, only enough to punish. So Rome ruled through client kings, local rulers who maintained their thrones by accepting Roman oversight. This system required one thing above all: credibility. Client kings had to believe their cooperation would be rewarded, but they also had to believe that challenging Rome meant total destruction. They ruled through fear, but not merely fear of conquest, fear of worthlessness, fear that everything you have built will mean nothing, that your bloodline will be absorbed, that your kingdom will forget you, that your own children will become Roman. When Rome captured a queen, they faced a crucial choice: execute her fast, clean.
She becomes a martyr. Her people remember her as a hero who died resisting. Resistance becomes noble. Sacrifice becomes honorable. Another generation grows up hearing stories about the queen who chose death over submission. Stories are dangerous. Stories inspire. Rome had learned this lesson from figures like Spartacus, whose execution centuries earlier inspired 3 more slave revolts in the following century. Or they could let her live, keep her visible, let her age, let her become ordinary. Let her people see their once mighty queen living as a Roman dependent, her daughters married to Roman men, her grandchildren speaking Latin, her bloodline absorbed into the very empire that destroyed her. Let them watch power dissolve into irrelevance. Execution creates legends. Survival creates questions. Zenobia spent her final 30 years in that villa outside Rome. Ancient sources do not record what she did there. Whether she wrote, whether she received visitors, whether she maintained correspondence with Palmyra, whether her daughters visited, we simply do not know. We do not know if she asked them to think about what survival truly meant. Every day, waking up in a Roman villa, eating Roman food, speaking Latin because no one around you speaks Palmyrene anymore, watching your daughters marry men whose fathers conquered your empire, watching your grandchildren grow up Roman, not tortured, not imprisoned, not executed, just irrelevant. Execution ends the story. The queen becomes legend. Her people can say she died rather than submit. She chose honor over survival. She resisted to the end. But survival makes people ask, was resistance worth it? And if the answer even might be no, why would anyone resist again? Now go back to Boudica. Her public flogging, her daughter's violation in public, in front of the Iceni people. Rome didn't do that to break her. They did it to provoke her. They wanted the rebellion because they had learned that gradual subjugation created ongoing, simmering resistance. When Rome provoked immediate, total rebellion and then crushed it completely, the conquered territory stayed quiet. Boudica's rebellion ended with 80,000 Britons dead in a single afternoon at an unknown battlefield. Her army, vastly larger than the Roman forces, was annihilated through Roman discipline and positioning. Tacitus claims she poisoned herself rather than face capture. Her defeat was so total, so bloody, that Britain stayed quiet for 3 generations. A living Boudica would have been dangerous, a symbol of resistance, a rallying point for future rebellions. A dead Boudica, crushed after a failed revolt that cost 80,000 lives, became a warning. The Romans understood something that we often pretend to have forgotten. The cruelest thing you can do to a queen isn't to kill her. It's to let her live long enough to watch everything she built mean nothing. If stories like this disappear, we do not evolve, we merely repeat. Crimson Historians exists because someone needs to remember. Subscribe if that matters to you. But the story doesn't end with their deaths, or even their survival. It ends with what Rome did after. 3 generations later, Roman historian Cassius Dio writes about British queens with a tone that borders on anxiety. He describes Queen Cartimandua of the Brigantes,
a Roman ally who turned over the fugitive Caratacus and maintained peace for decades, with language that emphasizes her political marriages, her diplomatic skills, her ability to negotiate. He never mentions military capability. He never suggests she ruled through strength. Why? Because Rome had successfully redefined what queenship could mean in Britain. Not warriors, but diplomats, mediators, marriage brokers, never threats.
After Zenobia, no Eastern queen challenged Rome for 2 centuries. When Palmyra rebuilt, it never crowned another woman. The city-state that had been ruled by queens since the 1st century CE suddenly stopped, not because of law, but because of memory. After Boudica, Celtic tribes in Britain stopped putting women in military command. The archaeological record shows it clearly. Warrior burials that had included women for centuries suddenly stopped including them after 60 CE. This wasn't coincidence. This was learned behavior. Rome itself fell in 476 CE. The empire that perfected breaking queens without killing them eventually collapsed from within, weakened by succession crises, relentless civil wars, and unstable leadership. And one of the recurring problems? Rome never successfully established female succession.
Imperial wives and mothers wielded enormous shadow power, certainly, but that very ambiguity, that indirect influence, created profound instability. Agrippina, Livia, Julia Domna, powerful women, all of them, yet they operated solely through sons and husbands because they could never rule directly. The same system that so effectively broke foreign queens, the very mindset that stripped them of their power and meaning, also prevented Rome from stabilizing its own royal women. The irony is almost funny. Almost. Zenobia's villa still exists. It's a ruin outside Rome now, barely marked, rarely visited. No tours, no plaques. The Mamertine prison, where male captive kings were executed, is a major tourist attraction, preserved, documented. You can stand in the cell where Vercingetorix died. You can see where Jugurtha starved. Guided tours run every hour. But there's no monument to what happened to queens, no marker for Boudica's daughters, whose names we don't even know. No memorial for the women who survived, triumphs, and spent decades living in Roman villas, watching their empires forget them. History remembers the executions. It forgets the survival. Because survival wasn't mercy, it was the punishment that lasted longer. We still do this, not with chains, not with triumphs, but we still measure power by who breaks publicly and who doesn't. We still watch powerful women fall and ask, did she stay dignified? Did she cry? Did she beg? Did she maintain composure? We've upgraded the technology of humiliation. We haven't upgraded the impulse. History asks, what happened to captured queens? The better question is, what did Rome need captured queens to become in order for the empire to function? And have we stopped needing that? A 6th century Syrian chronicler preserves what might be a quote from Zenobia. It might be invention, impossible to verify, but it sounds right. In my time, I was one of the most powerful women in the East. Now I am an ornament in a Roman garden, useful only as proof that resistance ends in decoration. You've just witnessed a truth history tried to bury, not by destroying evidence, but by deliberately rebranding it as mercy. Don't let it stay buried. Zenobia died sometime around 274 CE. We don't know where. We don't know if anyone mourned. That's not an accident. That's the entire point. The ultimate message was not the queen's death, but her gradual erasure, the slow, agonizing fade into irrelevance. This was a lesson etched not in blood, but in the quiet, desolate landscape of forgotten memory. It's a stark reminder that true power isn't just about wielding swords or commanding legions. It's about controlling the narrative, shaping perception, and understanding the profound impact of what is remembered, and more crucially, what is allowed to be forgotten. Rome didn't just conquer kingdoms, it conquered the very idea of what a queen could be. Meticulously dismantling their legacy piece by piece, turning legend into cautionary tale. This wasn't merely vengeance, it was strategy. A calculated dismantling of female leadership that sent a chilling message across the vast expanse of the empire. Defy Rome,
and your glory will not be a tragedy remembered in song. It will be a whisper, a footnote, a life lived in obscurity, a testament to utter powerlessness. The very act of living for Zenobia became a living monument to Rome's absolute dominion, a monument to the chilling efficacy of psychological warfare over brute force. And that, perhaps, is the most disturbing truth of all. The longest-lasting punishments are those that haunt the future, not merely those that end a life. We, in our modern world, still inherit fragments of this ancient Roman psychology. We see echoes in how we treat powerful women who challenge established norms.
The public scrutiny, the dissection of their every move, the yearning to see them falter, to witness their humiliation, it's a direct lineage from those Roman streets. We may not have golden chains or lion cages, but our digital arenas provide platforms for equally potent forms of public spectacle and degradation. The impulse to diminish, to render ordinary, to turn strength into a symbol of a failed challenge remains disturbingly potent. We are still quick to label a woman's fall as a personal failing, ignoring the systemic pressures, the carefully orchestrated narratives that push her toward that precipice. We still, perhaps unknowingly, seek to witness the moment her composure cracks, her dignity falters, her strength gives way. Because deep down, some part of our collective consciousness still fears the unchecked power of a woman who dares to defy. We still need to ask, and often get, the answer to that question. Was resistance worth it?
The story of Zenobia and Boudica isn't just about two queens in an ancient empire. It's a mirror reflecting our own subconscious biases, our inherited narratives about female authority and its perceived threats. It shows us how cultures, even those we consider advanced, meticulously construct mechanisms to control and neutralize perceived dangers. Understanding this history is not about glorifying the past, but about illuminating the present. It's about recognizing that the humiliation we often celebrate or silently approve of in public life has a long, calculated lineage. It's about seeing beyond the surface, beyond the glint of golden chains or the flash of modern headlines, to the deeper, more insidious purpose behind the spectacle. It's about asking ourselves, what narratives are we perpetuating? What subtle messages are we sending about the cost of defiance?
And are we, in our modern sophistication, truly so different from the Roman crowds who cheered at the spectacle of a queen rendered powerless? The lesson Zenobia's life taught was brutally effective. Challenge Rome, and your legend will be erased, your legacy absorbed, your very existence a testament to your ultimate insignificance. Your people will not remember you as a hero, but as a cautionary tale of futility. So, as you go forward, remember the quiet ruin of Zenobia's villa, the unmarked graves of Boudica's daughters. Remember that history is not just what is written down, but what is allowed to fade into the whispers of the forgotten. Our responsibility is to challenge those silences, to unearth the hidden narratives, and to ensure that the hard-won lessons of the past are not condemned to repeat in the present.